When I was starting out in music production, I remember really struggling with the basics. What to focus on, how to get better, and how to make my tracks sound professional. So in this video, I'm breaking down 5 essential production tricks or aspects that will help you level up faster, improve your sound, and help you make artist-ready tracks. The first aspect is often the first step in producing something. That is sound selection. This is a really key aspect right at the start of producing. Ultimately, this can determine the style of music that you're creating. The genre, the style, the feel, and the mood of the track. It's great to have in mind what you want to create when you're selecting the sounds, so you can be really intentional in what you select and create. It's also worth saying though that it's not like if you pick the wrong sound at the start, the whole track is then doomed to be bad. An important aspect and thing to learn in music production is the ability to recognize when a sound needs changing, recognizing that a sound you've selected no longer works in what you've produced, and switching it out for something else. So don't worry, you can of course change sounds throughout the whole production process. But selecting sounds isn't just about selecting individual sounds which sound good, they have to be sounds which fit and blend together well. So I recommend when selecting sounds to have the beat playing when you're looking for the next sound and auditioning them, listening to them. Of course you can't do that at the very start because you obviously don't have anything there in the project. You don't have that first layer down. But when you do, from then on, you need to listen to all the sounds that you're trying out in context with what you've produced. Another tip with sound selection is not to pick too many sounds which sound similar to each other. If they're really similar, they will clash and make it sound messy. So pick things that are different but complement each other. An example could be you've got a smooth, echoey synth. Then you choose to add a really gritty sound on top. Those two sounds are both very different, but they can complement each other really well. So now we move on to the next essential aspect of music production, and that is layering. And this pretty seamlessly follows on from what I was talking about in sound selection, but layering is what's key, as well as mixing, which I'll come on to later, in making your tracks sound full and professional. To create a fullness in your tracks is pretty simple. It requires filling more space in the audio spectrum, making it wider, rather than keeping it narrow and concentrated. So when you're producing, putting melodies on top of each other, try to have them fill different places and spaces in the audio spectrum. And that could inform the decisions you make in sound selection as well, which makes sense because all these aspects are interlinked and connected. To layer well, you have to select sounds well, and the sounds you select depend on your understanding of layering. So if I have some keys which are playing some chords, they're not really playing any low notes or any top line melodies, and the tone of the keyboard is pretty light and high. So what I could layer on top of this is a piano, which is, let's say, more darker and mellow. So it's going to take up more of the lower end of the spectrum. Then I could add a synth, which is doing the top line melody, and is pretty bright and sparkly. So that's taking up the higher end of the spectrum. And a key thing to note is to make a track full, it doesn't mean you need to make it sound really complicated. The trick is finding the balance so that the track sounds full and interesting, but still has simplicity and is catchy. Which is why layering sounds on top of each other, which play the same thing, is a great idea, because it still allows for space for the artist and isn't distracting with loads of different melodies happening at the same time, but at the same time you're adding to the track and making it sound more full. So obviously a crucial aspect to making professional sounding tracks is the actual melodies that you create. Now, in a sense, there is no get rich quick scheme here. There is no way to be really good at this without just repeating the process and practicing a lot of creating your own melodies, experimenting and then listening back to what you create. The best way to get better at making melodies, of course alongside repetition, is to listen to songs and study what the melodies are doing. Listen to some songs in the genre you're creating, maybe that's R&B. Listen to some R&B songs, listen to what the melodies are like in the song. What you're listening for is their kind of frequency throughout a section, what and where they're filling the gaps. Is the melody sort of sustained throughout the section, or is it more staccato and dotted throughout? A mistake that I made with how I created my melodies at the start was that I felt that throughout a section they had to be playing the whole time. What you come to realize is that creating a catchy melody is more like a bit of a puzzle. Another visual metaphor for you. A puzzle isn't made up of a couple huge jigsaw pieces. Much like a melody isn't just one thing. It should be multiple different layers which are kind of filling in different gaps. Often the best melodies are simple, so do not think that to create professional sounding music, your melodies have to be really complex. Often the best beats and the beats that sell the most and get the most interest from artists are the ones that are super catchy and simple. A melody can make a beat catchy if it's easy to grab a hold of sonically, if the melody is easy to hear and listen to. Creating a melody is effectively creating a pattern within the key that you're in. As I said, this could be as simple as just repeating a few notes and just letting the track breathe. The best place to start at the beginning of producing a track, I think, is to start with the chord progression, especially as a beginner, and then going from there. You can, of course, make it less chord progression sounding later into producing the track. But for starting a track and creating catchy melodies on top, it's good because you can allow the track to breathe and not feel like the melodies that you're creating have to fill all the space. Here's what I mean. As you can hear in that very simple example, it's just about adding little things here and there to create an atmosphere. So now probably the most complicated or viewed as the most complex aspect of production, the mixing. In my experience, this as a beginner was an absolute nightmare. I always felt I had no idea what I was doing mixing wise and could never understand what I needed to do to make my tracks sound really good, but at the same time get really frustrated at why they didn't sound good. So for mixing, again, the best thing you can do is use reference tracks. It's like using a target. Getting frustrated with not getting the mix sounding good and professional without listening to professional tracks is like having to shoot an arrow at a target, having no idea where that target is, not being able to see the target, so having no idea where to shoot the arrow, and then wonder why your arrows ended up nowhere near the target. There's no way you're going to know where your mixes need to improve if you're not using reference tracks, a point at which you can compare your tracks to. What I also recommend is watching as many videos as you can on how to mix properly and getting as much feedback on your mixes as much as you can. The key mixing mistake that I hear when I hear a lot of people that don't really have great mixes is that the track sounds raw. It's raw! Now, of course, some music needs to be raw, and the style of music that I create a lot, which is folk, that's a key aspect to it. However, most of the time, this rawness is sort of out of place. It's a result of a multitude of things, often sound selection, but primarily mixing. An example, a dark trap type beat often uses pianos. However, if this piano is left unmixed or mixed poorly, it just sounds too out of place, too raw, too much like just a normal piano. So it's great to experiment with different effects and use modulation effects on your melodies, like chorus and flanger and saturation, to create more interesting sounds and make your instruments sound less amateurish. A good thing to set you on the right path is to download a few free different audio effects plugins, which can help you achieve these sounds. Free ones I'd recommend would be Baby Audio's Magic Switch Chorus plugin. They also have a free delay plugin, Cable Guy's Shaper Box, but the free version of it, Valhalla Supermassive Reverb, that's a free reverb, Soft Tube Saturation Knob, and a distortion plugin by Blep Effects called Destructor. Of course, there are a few other essential production tricks, so if you guys would like a part 2, please let me know and I'll get that to you. But that's all I've got for you for now. Join the producer Discord in the description, and I'll see you in the next video.